Football fans, welcome to the Football v Football podcast. This is going to be a bit of a different episode here. Not going to be talking about any games today per se. I just wanted to get out an episode here referring to the Damar Hamlin situation, and we're kind of going to extrapolate a little bit here and talk about more broadly the violent kind of nature and reality of the NFL. Gonna have just an open conversation here about you know maybe what led to this, why it happened, and maybe steps to take in the future to possibly prevent it. Of course, before starting, I wanted to extend, of course, sincere prayers for the well-being of Damar and his family, and kind of just explain what happened during the game. So this happened during the past Monday night game between the Bengals and the Bills. It was a routine play in the first quarter. T. Higgins had a reception, and Damar kind of just engaged him for a tackle. And obviously, him and Higgins had more of the momentum here, and kind of pushes Hamlin backward, and they kind of fell together. But the tackle itself was Hamlin wrapping up Higgins a little bit high, and his he was kind of Higgins was kind of leading a little bit with his head and his shoulders, and Hamlin went high to wrap him up. So it kind of led his his chest was exposed a little bit, and so he kind of slammed into to Hamlin's chest. And there was nothing dirty about this play. Obviously, this was kind of a very routine play, and um, you know, Hamlin made the play. It was fine. He popped up, and then a couple seconds later, he kind of fell back down, as though what happens when somebody faints, or when somebody gets knocked out. Your body just kind of freezes and gives out, and your head slams back against the ground because they essentially have no control over their body. So what happened after that? Emergency medical staff from both teams ran onto the field and eventually, gave him CPR. It was said he was not breathing for 9 to 10 minutes, which is an extremely scary situation. And eventually, he is put into the ambulance, taken to the local hospital, put on a ventilator, where initially he needed 100% oxygen, um, and couldn't breathe on his own. But now I believe he is at 50%, able to breathe 50%, and still needs the ventilator 50%. So he's doing about half the breathing on his own. But this is 2 days later, more than 2 days later, and he's still in critical condition. So, yeah, like I mentioned before, I want to just kind of talk about a couple of things here. Just recap. So basically, what led to this, why it's happened, how to prevent it in the future. I'll just kind of start by opening the floor here to Ahmad Yusuf. If you have any just general overall thoughts to get started, and I'll kind of ask some progressive questions about as we kind of move on. But just general thoughts about this situation and overall in the NFL.
Yeah. First, I just want to echo what you said. Prayers out to Damar and his family, and really, like, it's interesting. Like, I feel like in our culture, it's a global thing. These athletes and these celebrities, and it can be whoever. Like, they're on TV so much that it's almost like you know them without knowing them. And I feel like a lot of us really felt, we felt a lot when we saw this or we heard about it. Um, it, and so I want to extend those thoughts and prayers out to the fans, friends, like whoever was affected by this, because this was a very public, kind of occurrence. It was on TV. So I think there was a lot of people who were affected by this. Yeah, I was. It's funny. I actually didn't see it live. I was, I was driving back. I was out of town. I was driving back, and I was kind of following along on Twitter. And I just saw these comments, like these tweets. This is really scary. Oh my god! And I was like, yo, what is going on? And so then I had to go back and look at what it was. And I got to tell you, man, like when I saw him just kind of collapse, like subhanallah, man, like it was crazy. It's like you see somebody, you know, almost go lifeless, like right on the field. Like he's completely fine. He makes his tackle. He stands up, and then boom, like he just like collapses. And I just you know I it's bad because I kept watching it and watching it, and then I was like, okay, I got to stop watching this.
Hmm.
I just got to stop. Out of respect for him, like I got to stop watching this, and just stunned. Like I could not believe what I was seeing, and I'm sure we'll get into this at some point. Like I think we've seen some occurrences of this in other sports, but this is the first time. I've been watching football my whole life. This is the first time seeing anything even remotely close to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Naif, I know you're on the call here. I'm not sure. Can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, just to give you a recap. So we just wanted to kind of start by giving an overall view of what you thought when you saw initially what happened with Damar, and then we'll open it up to kind of the NFL in general, the violent nature, how to maybe prevent it in the future. But what did you think when you initially saw the play with Damar?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of woke up to you guys talking about it. I usually wake up like midway through the Monday night game. So first thing I did is I was trying to check the score, and I didn't see a score, and then I went on the chat. I saw this commotion. Uh, I don't know, man. It really puts things into perspective for me. Like for instance, like even yesterday I was playing basketball and I was just kind of hesitant. I was trying to set a pick and I just moved out of the way. And it's not usually like that for me. Like usually I'll just set that pick, take the hit. So for me, after watching it, I mean, I didn't know that could happen. Bad things can happen when you're playing a physical sport, but just
Yeah.
all the coverage regarding this, it's like one of those freak accidents. I don't know. I
Yeah.
still don't know how I feel about it, honestly, and I don't know how the NFL are going to go back to playing. Seriously.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's the reason why we're kind of talking about it today. There are, of course, still a lot of questions. I mean, Demar is still in critical condition, and we don't really know what's gonna happen yet. We're kind of in that moment that it could go either way. And um, speaking just more broadly about the the state of the NFL, the state of football, just kind of more broadly. So I kind of started talking about this in the chat, but as we progress in the state of technology and health, and you have players like that have been vocal about how much money they spend on their body, like LeBron James and Russell Wilson have come out and said they both spend $1 million a year on their body, and these athletes increasingly become bigger, faster, stronger, and there's always kind of that. The sense that kind of progresses the game, that the game is getting better because players are getting bigger and faster and stronger. And particularly in the NFL, since it's a full contact sport, the way sports like basketball and baseball and hockey aren't really. So, you know, you the action doesn't stop in the NFL until one man takes another man physically down to the ground. And that it requires a level of using your body as a weapon that can become very dangerous as you become bigger, faster, and stronger. And I think it will only kind of become more dangerous as the NFL like adapts to a lot of these things that are happening. And I definitely think that one of the things that Omar had proposed is putting more padding into the uniform. That's a very kind of um, uh, that's a first step for a lot of people. And I know I saw some backlash against this saying, "Oh, you're going to make them even hotter if they play in Miami and Tampa and a lot of these warmer weather places." Um, but I'm sure there's the technology to make it so that there is ways that to make it more breathable. And I'll say this as well, just as a broad question: if someone in this day and age, and Alma, you mentioned that in the past this kind of happened. I know somebody in college basketball this happened too, and they took him to the hospital. He later passed away. It happens in boxing and MMA, sports like that before. If someone dies on the field, like Bad Dashad, uh, because that's an ever-present possibility in a lot of these violent sports. Like I mentioned, this sport, MMA, boxing. If that were to ever happen, what becomes of the NFL? I mean, you know, how does a sport carry on? Even legally, how does it deal with that? How can it promote it to kids? How can you promote football to kids from a young age if something like that happens? And does it become like flag football? Omar, I know you were kind of in the legal field, and I'm curious if something like that were to happen, if a player passes on the field. What kind of legal things does it open up for the NFL? Can it continue to build itself as a brand? What do you think would happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully, inshallah, we never have to kind of
So,
address that. But you know, it, I think like before we even get to that point, I think what happened on Monday, the NFL is going to have to do a lot of soul searching, to be quite honest with you. And I think like where we're at right now with this situation is going to change a lot of things. I don't think it's going to change the nature of the game, but I do think that people will start looking at certain things a lot differently. Because I agree with Naif, like, so in a general point, I think this was a freak accident, right? It's what the doctors are saying is what is it, commotio cordis? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but the way that they're explaining it is that blunt trauma to the chest, and it has to occur at precisely the right interval of the heartbeat, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Like the probability of it happening is so low, right? Because it has to happen just the right time. And so the fact that that happened is just crazy. But having said that, the fact is that it did happen, and I promise you that there are parents out there who are like, "Oh, I'm not letting my kid play football," right? Like I mean, my parents. My dad did not want. We love football, but he did not want me playing. You know, and I think the league. So I'm going to try to be fair here. I think the league has taken steps to make the game more safe. They've eliminated certain kinds of hits. They have made certain rule changes, and they're not perfect. And in a lot of ways, sometimes it's funny because I feel like they go too far in certain areas, but then in other areas, I don't think they go far enough.
exactly.
Right? Like roughing the passer, for example, they're going way too far. But what about lowering your helmet, like as an offensive player, right? And by the way, I want to say this. I want to get this out. T. Higgins is not to blame for this. He did nothing illegal.
Agreed.
T. Higgins is totally fine. Prayers up to T. Higgins. I'm sure he feels horrible right now, but he did nothing wrong. It's not his fault. I'm just saying, separate and apart from that, I see this all the time where running backs lower their helmet into the chest of defenders, or into an oncoming defender. Bro, that's like blunt trauma going to your body, to your chest, maybe to your head. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if over time the game evolves to the point where you see the elimination of certain. We're already there, to be quite honest. Like 30 years ago, right? Even 20 years ago, the game that I grew up watching, it's different. You don't see the same kind of hits. You don't talk about receivers being scared to go over the middle, right? When's the last time you heard about that? But I gotta say, I don't think it'll go so far as to change to flag football. I don't. I mean, I know that's kind of an extreme. I just don't see that happening. I feel like there's a way to mitigate a lot of the risks, and just to play devil's advocate or look at the superficial aspect of this, I think there's a lot of money at stake here as well, and I think they're going to do whatever they can to ensure that their their assets aren't affected by this. And the legal aspect, I'd have to look at what a player's contract has in it, but I'd imagine that there's some kind of waiver that they have to sign that that
Right.
you're signing away. I mean, definitely severe injury of some sort. Definitely. I don't know if like any fatal injuries are in there. It could be. Like I would have to take a look at that, but I'd imagine you sign up to this like I was forbidden to play football, but I did try out,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember our high school football coach. He said basketball is a contact sport. Baseball is a contact sport. Football is a collision sport. These are
Well
grown
said.
men. These are grown men, alphas, 300-pound dudes like colliding with each other.
Car accidents. They
Yep.
say it feels like a car accident.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I would see it.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, Naif.
I was just gonna say, I was reading a stat where it said 20% of deaths in car accidents are from the same exact thing that happened to Damar Hamlin. So
Wow.
yeah. So speaking of car accidents, I mean, it's kind of crazy, man. It's kind of crazy that he was the guy given the hit, and honestly, it looked like a routine tackle, man.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And when I was watching it, when I saw the initial highlight, I just saw him make the tackle, and then I saw him get up, and the camera shifted. So I didn't really see him stumbling until later. I saw another angle. It looked textbook to me. So
Yeah.
it's kind of scary, man.
Yeah. Naif, what do you think? Just more broadly, where does the NFL go from here? For example, right now already they are adjusting, they're moving things around, moving games around. If the worst were to happen to Damar, because even if it takes him a while and he does eventually recover, I think this is still something that the NFL has to recover from. But what do you think happens to the NFL if the worst happens here? What do you think brought us to this point? Is there anything more the NFL could do, hasn't done? What do you think?
I mean, hopefully he pulls through. To be honest, but
Yeah.
I don't know, man. You're already seeing some hesitancy from these players. It's gonna be hard to just get right back on the field, especially after. I mean, we've seen people go down, man. We've seen people go down and they've taken a little break during the game and then gotten back to the game. I think this is the first time we see a game just completely postponed after starting.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I don't know how players are just going to jump right back into it. I think it's going to be on the back of every player's mind when taking a hit. I think you're going to see people ease up initially, just because of how scary the incident was and how normal it looked beforehand.
Yeah.
I hope he pulls through. I really don't know. Some teams canceled their initial walkthroughs. Some teams canceled their media availability. So this is kind of unprecedented for us. We see these hits happen like 300 times every week, and it's nothing. It's normal. And here we have a normal hit that ended in a tragic moment. So I really don't know how they jump back in. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, the status quo, the MO of the NFL is usually to jump back into playing right after the player is even taken to a hospital in the same way that he was. And I'm going to say a few things about the NFL here because what Ahmed mentioned earlier, I think what they are doing is they're doing some they're taking some micro steps in order to make the game safer, but on a macro level, they're really not. And I think that they are more focused on money, and I'll say a few things about that. So I think the NFL kind of is starting to show their greedy face a little bit here especially over the past week. I've noticed a couple things. One, in my opinion, the only reason the NFL stopped this game is because of the public outcry. Immediately, what happened on social media after this happened, a lot of the players and even guys like Skip Bayless who are hanging on to careers by a thread at this point. That I mean, I don't know if you saw. You were somebody shared it in the chat. I think almost shared it in the chat today. How Shannon Sharp didn't show up yesterday and then showed up today and was like viscerally annoyed with Skip Bayless because he feels like Skip Bayless and the NFL doesn't value the life of players when they're just their lives are hanging in the balance there. If there wasn't that kind of public outcry on social media, I think that the NFL was going to continue on with that game like they do with every other game. And I think, like, logistically, what I heard happened is that the NFL was going to go on with this game, but not only was there public outcry, but the Bills, the players refused to play that game, and then the Bengals took the cue from the Bills and said, okay, if they're not going to play, we're not going to play. It's not going to be like a forfeit or whatever. It was just like a solidarity thing. And then the NFL had no choice after that. You had two teams that were unwilling to play. So otherwise, I 100% believe that the NFL would have continued because this impacts their bottom line, their revenue, and their advertising dollars. And that's what means most to them. And that's kind of manifested itself in many ways. And I am going to extrapolate a little bit here. Obviously, I know that this is something that is not nearly as important, but this thing about when they're scheduling the final game of the season here, putting that game, forcing themselves to put that game on Sunday Night Football, that Packers Lions game on Sunday Night Football, instead of focusing on the integrity of the game, because they have a contract with NBC and because they want to put a game on there that maximizes their revenue instead of focusing on the integrity of the game. And obviously, like I said, I know it's nowhere near as important as what's going on here, but this is kind of a microcosm of like what this league is doing, that they're prioritizing money over money over health, money over integrity. And the only way that they will be moved to do anything other than that is if there is a critical mass of people, if there is a significant enough pressure to push them to do otherwise. So I think we need to continue to, kind of push the NFL to be better, to be a lot better. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any final thoughts here? I just wanted to, this doesn't have to be a long podcast. I just kind of wanted to get this out. Do you guys have any kind of final thoughts here about, moving forward or anything related to the topic here?
Yeah, I had a few points. So first, just to follow up on what you were just talking about. So the NFL came out, and despite the reports in the moment, and I think Joe Buck said this on the broadcast that the players were starting to warm up, and it was like 5 minutes after the incident had occurred, or something along those lines. The NFL, later denied it and said that there's no truth to it. ESPN, I think, came out today or yesterday, stood by those reports. If I'm reading between the lines and I'm looking at the history of the NFL, I think what happened is that they were getting ready to resume play, and now they're just trying to cover face by, denying those reports. When in reality, I would respect it a lot more if they just said, hey guys, we messed up. We thought, that the situation would have been remedied a lot sooner. Maybe he would have been resuscitated, which, by the way, even if he was, they shouldn't have continued the game. But maybe if they just admitted what they were thinking, right, I would have just admitted that they made a mistake. But they just refuse to admit that, right? They won't admit that they made a mistake. They'll actually try to cover it up instead, which makes them look even worse.
Absolutely.
So, I wish that they had just done that, number one. Number two, this kind of reminds me a little bit, if you're a wrestling fan, or I don't know if you grew up watching wrestling, but I know Naif did. Mm-hmm. The night Owen Hart died, and again, inshallah, hopefully Damar pulls through, but Owen Hart died during the event, and they continued the show. Vince McMahon continued the show. And I listen to so many people talk about it now. They all regret that the show continued, right? That they still kept on going with the show. And I think that if the NFL had continued or resumed play, and even if they had played this week, to be quite honest with you, it would have reminded me of that. And I agree that the public outcry and the players' refusal, it was really like them taking a stand against this, is what it seems like. This would have been a very similar situation to that. Probably not as dire, given the outcome, but yeah, it would have reminded me a lot about that. And then the last thing I kind of just want to say, as Naif had said, this really puts things in perspective, and I think we kind of live in this world, in this culture, like in these modern times. It's a very like death denying culture, right? Like it's like you don't really see it, even though it's such a real part of life. And when that real life strikes you, it's such a shock. It's like, oh my god, right? But bro, like when you're living in a world of artificiality, like the truth is always very shocking, right? I remember when I saw those reports of Kobe dying, in the helicopter, I could not believe it. Like I was just like, is this a hoax? Is this somebody being an a-hole? Like what's going on? Like this was crazy. And so then seeing Damar just kind of collapse on the field, it's a shock. And like you could tell the players were shocked. Everybody in the stadium was shocked because like you are not used to seeing this part of reality, right? And like it kind of, I think, shocks you into realizing what's really important in life, right? No matter how much we love football, no matter how much money it makes, there are things that are more valuable. And I think that, the players, that's really what they're kind of advocating for in making sure that they're respected and heard here.
Yeah. No, true. Really, really good points. Yeah. And yeah, the point about the Owen Hart passing away and them continuing to that's a really good parallel. Yeah, actually, I remember that from a long time ago. But yeah, that absolutely is. And you talked about the NFL just more broadly. It is arrogance and hubris, and the fact that they were refusing to admit that they initially did make a mistake. And the same thing also, actually, I saw today with Skip Bayless. He's refusing to take down that tweet at all. He's saying nobody here has a problem with it. I refuse to take down that tweet. So there is a lot of arrogance and hubris involved in this. And like you said, I think it only really is going to change when there's enough support for people to move them to a certain direction. And just like an overall, when I think about football, just kind of overall, right? So I think the NFL and football in general kind of straddles this line between like the old amphitheater and war and like really things that um, used to result in death, like in a person or an animal or something like that, and they're really straddling that line with football in general and the NFL, and it really does need to be like reined in. I know that people like in a primal way enjoy watching that sort of thing, but this really needs to when the lines start to get blurred, like you mentioned, the lines of like what's reality and what is um, life and death, and what's a game. Once those lines start getting blurred, you have a real problem. Um, but yeah, I mean, Naif, do you have any final thoughts on this before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, Skip Bell is just a tool, man. I was reading a tweet where I think it was like 5 days after 9/11. He wrote this whole article saying that when they canceled the games that week, he wrote this whole article saying that the players failed the people by not providing them with an escape. So I mean, this is par for the course for Skip Bayless, to be honest.
Bad taste.
Yeah, I mean, and on the subject of money, man, I think the NFL is going to lose a lot of money on this. That whole decision, it took way longer than it should have,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially it came down to the players saying no, right? That should have been a decision that the NFL took right away, I feel. And I think they lost a lot of money on this. And it's going to be interesting to see how they try to recover from this.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, we're all kind of waiting and seeing at this point. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and close it out here. So I just wanted to say, continued best wishes to Damar Hamlin and his family, and we all obviously hope he gets through this and comes out healthy and thrives in life. Not only health, but also is able to continue to thrive. And hopefully, this turns into an overall good. Not only with those donations. I think he's had $5 million in donations to his charity, which is to provide toys to underprivileged children in his hometown in Pennsylvania. But also that this compels the NFL and football overall to be better and to become better at prioritizing the things that are more important. And by more important, I mean more important than money. So, yeah, I want to thank you guys for jumping on. Omar Yusuf and NFG. Obviously, we're kind of in a wait and see mode here. Hopefully, Damar is able to get through this, and we can. We'll see what happens with the rest of the NFL here. But I want to thank everyone for listening to this. This has been the Football v Football podcast. Again, Omar Yusuf, NFG. Thank you guys so much for your time. Have a fantastic day, football fans.